Alright, so you finally decided now's the time to upgrade your movie watching experience with surround sound. Awesome, you won't regret it. So you choose to go with a multi-channel receiver like the Sony STR here. But you get it home, out of the box, only to find this. And this can be pretty intimidating. Well, I'm here to break it down for you in a new segment we're calling In Layman's Terms. With so many input and output options, there are multiple ways to set up your receiver. What we hope to accomplish in this video is to explain what each port is and how they interact, so that you can get the best quality output based on your individual setup. Let's start up top with the most common connections, the HDMI ports. HDMI, or High Definition Multimedia Interface cables, have become the industry standard for transferring high-definition video and audio. As you can see, these HDMI ports can support 4K content. But what is HDCP 2.2? HDCP 2.2 is the latest version of content protection for Ultra HD. Basically, it's to prevent people from pirating 4K content from Blu-rays or HD devices. So unless you're bootlegging movies, there's really nothing for you to worry about. But to make things easier on yourself, just make sure that all your devices are HDCP 2.2 compliant, and you want to make sure that you're using high-quality 4K HDMI cables. As you can see on this receiver, there are 6 HDMI inputs. For cable, satellite, game console, Blu-ray player, everything's pretty straightforward. However, as you can see, there are 2 outputs. Out A is the main output you are going to use when connecting to your television or projector. But what is ARC, and why do I need to know about it? Well, ARC stands for Audio Return Channel. This allows audio to pass both ways through the HDMI connection. So basically, you would only need the one HDMI cable to connect your television to your receiver with audio flowing both directions. Unfortunately, not every TV manufacturer has implemented ARC to send back 5.1 audio through the HDMI ARC connection. So let's say you're watching a movie on your smart TV through one of the apps like Netflix. It may be only pushing 2-channel stereo sound through your ARC connection. Now, depending on your TV to get the sound you're looking for, you may have to use another option, such as the optical cable, which we will get to in a little bit. And out B, well, that is there in case you want to add an additional monitor. Of course, there are the traditional analog input and outputs for audio and video, just in case you want to kick it old school and still have a working VHS player you want to connect. Now, if you do use the analog video in, you must use the analog monitor out to your TV. It will not work using the HDMI out. Now, the analog audio inputs can also be used for things like CD players or turntables. Moving on to the speakers. This particular Sony receiver is a 7.2 channel unit, which means it can power 7 speakers and 2 subwoofers. Now, the standard for surround sound is the 5.1 setup. 2 front speakers, 1 center channel speaker, 2 rears, and a subwoofer. You've seen the Dolby Digital 5.1 on your Blu-ray discs? Well, now you know what it means. With this unit, you have the option of adding additional speakers to your surround sound, and you can create a separate listening zone. So if you're watching a movie in one room and you want to play music in another, you can power the speakers from here. All you need to do is create a separate listening zone. Up at the top of the speaker inputs, you can see that it says impedance use 6 to 16 ohms. This is the amount of power the receiver can put out to the speakers. Now, explaining ohm usage and output is a whole other animal that I will be explaining in a future video, but for now I'll just say make sure that your speakers fall between the 6 and 16 ohm range. As you can see next to the speaker ports, there is an analog zone 2 out. That's there if you want to power another speaker in a separate zone. Below that is the analog out to your television and the subwoofer out. Now might be a good time to point out there are a lot of ports here that are labeled for the convenience of setting up. But that does not mean that is exactly how you need to do it. The analog video inputs, one is labeled satellite or cable TV. You can plug any type of analog video in. It does not have to be cable. Same with the HDMI inputs. Video on, game, DVD, all inputs that can be used. Moving on to the lower left of the receiver, you have your coaxial, optical, and antenna inputs. The coaxial and optical are digital audio inputs. The coaxial, as you can see, is an RCA type connection, but is specifically designed to handle the wider frequency bandwidth of the digital audio bit stream. So this input would be another alternative to plug in an audio source, say like a CD player. The optical port is for a fiber optic cable. Digital audio bit stream gets transmitted using pulses of light. This is used primarily for transmitting audio from your television to your receiver. Remember the ARC HDMI cable? If you're not getting the 5.1 surround sound from your television, then you might want to try using an optical cable. Unfortunately, again, depends on your television and your source material. Some TVs are designed to mute audio from the optical out when receiving Dolby Digital Plus audio. Now this Sony receiver can bypass that by going through a couple of steps in the settings menu. The FM antenna port is just that. It's there if you want to boost your FM reception. Sony opted for an F connector for their antenna, so other receivers may have different inputs. The IR remote is just in and out ports if you want to use an infrared remote or IR blaster, which allows you to use universal or smart remotes to control both your TV and receiver. The port is also there if you choose to add a remote extender so you can hide your receiver behind a cabinet and still be able to control it with the remote. Next to that is the Ethernet port. Now some might ask, why does my receiver even need an Ethernet port with all these other connections? Well, it can connect you to audio files from an external NAS drive, or it can be used as an alternative connection to internet, radio, or streaming services. It's also a useful option to update your firmware. Well, you might be wondering what these two little ports here are. Well, me too, they're unlabeled. Just kidding. No, these are most likely used by the manufacturer for servicing, so there's really no need to fuss with them. And finally, there's the RS-232C port. This is for hooking up your receiver to any home automation system or smart home control setup you may have in your home, such as Control4 or Laman. Well, I certainly hope you found this video useful. Now I know that most of the ports, at least on this Sony here, are labeled clearly, so your basic setup should be pretty straightforward. However, as I've shown, there are alternative ways to hooking up your receiver, and they may be more beneficial depending on your individual needs. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe, and you too can be enjoying the HiDEF lifestyle.